Good evening and welcome to the Forced Freedom Podcast, part of the Seeds of Liberty Network. You can find all of our content at theseedsofliberty.com and on Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher, and Twitter. I'm Donnie. My co-host is Lloyd. Say hello, Lloyd.
Hi.
So, this week we're just going to take a little nibble at the news. Try to keep up with some current events, and the reason we essentially do this is because a lot of the nonsense that people get reinforced with really comes through this fabricated consent from mass media. So tonight we're basically we're playing Sophistry Roulette. I went to Fox and I picked two stories. Lloyd went to CNN, picked two stories, and we're just gonna do a rundown of each and see how you're told one thing that you've probably grown up to believe, accept, etc. And in reality, it's just essentially lunatics running the show. I mean, I don't think there's a better way to put it.
Oh, Donnie, let me sing you the songs of my liberal people.
Yeah. I saw a meme. Let me sing the song of my people, and it was somebody using a GOW. It was like the perfect neocon, the neocon meme. Or a GOW is a Gatling automatic unit. It's a Gatling gun, so it's just burp, and 4,800 rounds a minute.
Burping guns, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I won the toss, and we're going to start off with Trump talks about ISIS. So let me go over just a few positives of Trump, and they are few. If anybody's keeping track, a lot of people have already said this, but Trump will speak truth to power, and that is very appealing, especially if you look back for, the better portion of my adult life. Nobody really speaks truth to power. They're all mealy-mouthing, bought and paid for politicians. No, not too many people have brought a new message to the arena. Ron Paul making such a big splash because that's what he did. So Trump really isn't afraid to get on stage with governors, senators, congressmen. In the past, we've had ex-presidents running for president, but he doesn't get one of those. It doesn't really matter to him, though. I don't think it would matter if Joe Biden or Dick Cheney was on the stage. This guy will essentially treat them all like the assholes that they are.
Yeah, he's got billions of dollars of fuck you money, and that goes a long way towards just allowing you to be honest.
Yeah. He doesn't have to be bought and paid for, and if anybody's going to buy and pay for anybody, it's going to be him. That's kind of his. That's his MO in life.
It's nice.
And I would say he's kind of. Rand Paul said he was hedging his bets at that debate they had, and I think he was correct in that. There's a good chance that Trump might split the Republican vote or do what Perot did for Bill Clinton the first time around, and provide a third-party option that will probably attract more Republicans than Democrats. So, Bill Clinton became president with 42% of the vote.
Yeah.
It was very far from the quote unquote majority. I say that because when you look at the actual stats, a lot of people don't vote. So when 125 million of a 320 million people country vote, and half of them vote for one guy, for 51%. How much of a majority are you really talking about? That's kind of a lie. So, so this guy's got an idea of what, quote unquote, we're going to do with ISIS, and strangely enough, it's the message that Americans love. We're going to drop high explosives on people and use a military force to get what we want.
But you are, yeah, America.
Yeah, America, fuck yeah, essentially being the story there. So, why is this guy so appealing? And I think a lot of it is cultural bias. Americans, as a rule, seem to think bombing somebody else for their resources is okay. And
I would actually narrow that to just Americans are they're big for the militarism. They dig it.
yeah, yeah,
I don't even think they need to justify it to a large extent. They just have to paint the target as a bad guy, and they can shoot the arrow and then paint the bullseye around it afterwards.
yep,
They really can.
yep. As long as it, I think America bought off a long time ago that the military solution produces the desired effect. Never mind the consequences. Never mind the cost. As long as the effect is good, subjectively good, then the use of the military is okay. And I think it's gotten us into far. I hate using the collective terms, but us. I think we're in way over our head on a lot of things at this point. I don't think we can keep throwing military at the problem.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, it's working. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. This is the nature of applying rationalism to politics. That which does not work will not continue. It's just like in economics. When X reaches the end of its rope, it stops, right? So yeah, clearly it's fulfilling its function. The bombing and everything, it is fulfilling its function. The function is not, however, the expressed will of the people who ostensibly are having their, this is not their idea of what they want through vis-a-vis the social contract. It's the will of the politicians because it gets them money, it gets them reelected, it keeps their, the military-industrial complex, which I hate that term because it always makes you sound like a conspiracy nut. But I mean, it's pretty well established in this country. It keeps all your constituents in those groups very happy because they keep, stamping out new bullet other things. I mean, hell, John Murtha, back when he was still in Congress, he was pandering straight to the military-industrial complex during the Iraq War to get reelected. And he's a Democrat.
Well, I mean, that's where the money is. I mean, he knew where the money was going. He knew they had it.
Yeah, and and to be fair to his little Democrat constituents, these were all unionized guys in the military-industrial complex too. So it's a double win for him. Come on, is he going to vote against, shedding more Iraqi blood for profits? No.
It's a little hard to cut out the middleman when you're the middleman.
Yeah, right. So yeah.
So, and I think you're correct in saying that the goals are being fulfilled. I don't think the goals that they state up front, for everybody, are the actual goals. But the actual goals that don't get broadcast to the public are the ones that are being fulfilled.
Oh, totally.
And,
well, it's a lot like most legislation, right? Like the USA Patriot Act, right?
Yeah, whatever the title of the bill is, it's directly the opposite.
Exactly. The Patient Affordable Care Act. Really, all these things are kind of actually the antithesis of how you're selling them. That's why they do it. The function is being, is being served.
Keep that narrative rolling is really the goal.
Yeah.
So here Trump is. I don't know how much of an actual. It's hard to tell. He doesn't really have much of a track record to run on as whether or not he's a politician. He seems, at least up front, he seems to be a very straightforward dude. So he might be living in a world where, hey, I'm a good businessman, therefore I'm a good leader. And there's some arguments to go with that. But I think the realm and the scope in which he wants to manage the globe is probably out of his depth.
Yeah.
He can balance a checkbook like nobody's business. I love how they try to slander the guy. And I'm not making any case for Trump. I would happy to see the presidency go away entirely, and I could care less who's there. So I'm not advocating for Trump, but I'd be willing to bet he could find a way to balance a budget.
Not to any, he couldn't get it done, but
he's constantly accused of filing for bankruptcy. The guy had hundreds of companies, and over the years, 4 or 5 of them went bankrupt.
yeah,
Not Donald Trump went bankrupt. 4 or 5 of those hundreds of companies, like he's got a 90. I want to say it's like a 99 point something percent win rate, or a 98%
yeah,
point something.
that's pretty impressive.
Right. He really really does understand business, and part of that is knowing the governmental process, because he definitely does that.
Hey, if you can do business in New York and not only just survive, but kick ass,
Yeah.
you know how to buy some politicians.
Yeah, so many bullshit regulations at the state, federal, and city level. So many, palms to grease. He really does know the business side of it, and I would think this guy could probably balance a budget. And the way he talks, I mean, the IRS is kind of another story, but the way he would balance the budget would essentially kill the IRS. So he doesn't really want any. He really would shake up that system if he could actually do it. I would argue that there's no one guy that goes to Washington that's going to change it. And
Yeah, Mr. Smith goes to Washington that's Hollywood.
more like Mr. fucking Magoo goes to Washington. But so his whole idea with ISIS is, hey, we're going to deprive them of oil. We're going to bomb them out of the area, and then we're going to take their oil. And while I could really understand why this is an attractive message to people, because we've been going to war for 10 years, people coming back dead, and what do we really have to show for it? And I mean, literally, we're really bad criminals.
Yeah.
We'll go and smash all the cars, all the windows out of a car, and then replace all the windows, and then give it back to the owner. But he has to buy a driver's license from us, or we won't let him drive the car. Like that's all we do. That's what foreign policy is. And Donald Trump is a lot more honest. He's just a straight up smash and grab fucking thug.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I can respect that.
I don't know what's more dangerous, the fact that he's just a straight up smash and grab thug. Now, granted, I understand it's effective, but the fact that people are drawn to that message, and every neocon that's out there is on the bandwagon. I was watching a little video on this. It's on the Fox site, where John Bolton is going on and on about, basically, without batting an eyelash, this guy just straight up, we should go and bomb those people and kill. America has to take charge. We're going to be the ones who does it. And they're, the point here is that the Saudi Arabians, they spend a ton of money on their military. They're number 3 in the world. They spend more than Russia. And they don't seem to want to get into the ISIS fight. And I think over the years, you can probably start telling who the protective groups are, because if Saudi Arabia was really worried about ISIS, they wouldn't really have to ask much permission to go and do that. They could go and do it by themselves.
Well, it's a lot like, anything else. You can look at these things from an economic standpoint, and it starts making perfect sense. Why does Europe not have any large standing militaries? Well, because we've been there for the last 50 or 60 years with 40,000 army soldiers and a whole corps of tanks. Mm-hmm. Well, gee, that's called subsidizing their defense.
Yep.
So what have we done in the Middle East?
Yep.
Since forever, we've maintained at least one carrier battle group there. And now, since the Gulf War, have ground-based contingents there permanently. Mm-hmm. Hello? Nobody needs to, our allies don't need to shoot anybody themselves.
Yep.
We're subsidizing them.
And this was really showed in the Afghanistan and Iraq, when the Americans are trying to train the people and then pull out. These people have no vested interest in doing this themselves in their country.
No, why would they?
They know that fighting back against ISIS is almost a death sentence, depending upon where you're living. It is a death sentence, and they know that if they don't fight back, they'll probably just be left alone. They lived under Saddam. If they didn't fight back under Saddam, they were probably going to be okay, and they went around living their life. Yeah, we live under a dictator. Most of the time, he doesn't give a shit what we're doing. He's got a couple of rules. We do it. Boom. They move on with their life.
Yeah.
So when you really can't force freedom on people.
No,
And
and really, I mean, that model of a dictator who's relatively tolerant, but has exploits people openly.
hmm
That's been the modus operandi in that area of the world since the Persians
hmm
were, battling the Greeks at Marathon.
Yep.
That's how they've always been.
Yep.
Minus the caliphate and everything, which was
hmm
actually a high point.
And and of course, when they're trying to sell a war, it's in our best interest. So how exactly do we have oil or interest in the Middle East? And no, don't go think I'm an idiot. I understand how this works. What I'm saying is, at what point does America get to declare somebody else's resources a strategic asset and then just violently impose our will on that geographical region? We could pump oil in Texas. It's a little more expensive, but we could do it. But we don't do it. We leave our oil sitting in the ground, and then we send a military to mess with the oil on the other side of the planet. And in theory, it's going to get cheaper because of that. And essentially, I mean, it's a cartel. It's an oil cartel ran by OPEC and backed with U.S. military power.
Right, and that's the problem is
Yeah.
because of the involvement of the military in backing corporate interests. The businesses are just looking at the bottom dollar. They're acting rationally in an irrational economic system.
Yep.
So they're like, hey, X, Y, and Z locations where we know there's likely oil cost $65 a barrel to get it out. This is how expensive it has to be in the market
Mm-hmm.
for us to profit off of drilling there.
Mm-hmm.
Here it's 55, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, hey, if because of domestic regulations, it's $65 a barrel for the profit threshold in Texas, but it's $55 because the United States military is going to subsidize the defense
Yep.
and conquest of these other places. Well, guess where we're going?
Yep. And all the workers there, they don't get OSHA. They don't get all of the regulatory state
No.
that America imposes on it. I mean, it's why the jobs are leaving this country anyway. But you just kind of get to see how literally this whole idea is America is going to raise our quality of life by attacking other countries.
Yeah.
That's what it really boils down to. And we don't always attack with the military. There is an economic warfare, and that has been waged in most of the countries on the planet. And the
It's
ones that fight back are the ones that get the military. So,
Yeah, no, if we were simply like this non-interventionist, sound money state, I would say go economic war. If someone screws with you, cut them off. Why not? That's a great solution to an external problem.
right.
Stop associating with them. That's beautiful. That's simple. It's not aggressive, and it gets the job done more often than not. But yeah, I mean, hey, once you involve the use of force, reason, long-term thinking, ethics, all that shit goes right out the window.
Yep. And I understand the pragmatism of this. It's much easier to make a living by, even if you have $1 million in your wallet, you steal somebody else's wallet and buy your ice cream with them. You still have $1 million in your wallet. It doesn't matter how
Totally.
rich you are. If you're spending somebody else's money, you're never getting any poorer.
Yeah,
So,
that's getting socialist.
yep. Yeah, exactly. So, I think the overall takeaway here is that Donald Trump really he has some high points that Americans are not used to in politics, but to say that this guy is somehow going to change things, I think, is a little bit crazy. He really is on the bandwagon with the same old shit, and that's not so wise to keep thinking that. I mean, we could go deep. We're staying on news here, but the system that attracts these kinds of people and insists on this is the way it's going to function, the system is never going to get better in this manner. Continuing to do the same set of circumstances over and over, expecting a different result.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly where the American public is right now. And here's the thing, they like to say, "Oh, this is the home of the brave." Let me tell you, the Egyptians rioting to overthrow, what was his name?
Yeah.
Mossadegh?
Uh, Mossad? No. God damn
No,
it.
not Mossad.
Now I can't even remember. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of him as Admiral Akbar, and I just know that's wrong.
Yeah. So, but I mean, all these places where we've been installing these nasty people just to keep this whole situation going. And, it's more and more becoming untenable. It's becoming obvious. But truth be told, the people in the world that really want change, they take to the streets. They really do. In mass, we're not going to deal with this anymore. And Americans don't do that. You could say, there's something going on in Ferguson. Okay. I understand. But they're not trying to change the system. They're really mad with the system. But they're not changing it. They're just trying to do battle with it, and that system was designed to do battle.
Yeah, like Ferguson's just like unchanneled, unfocused, rage. That's all it is. It's a 3-year-old who's not been raised well, lashing out because he subconsciously recognizes that he's not getting what he needs, and he's not being raised well. So yeah.
Yep. And like that's essentially the biggest problem, with with the American culture, is we're not interested in changing the circumstances. We always think that there's a fight. Oh, well, ISIS doesn't do what we want them to do. We'll bomb them. Yemen, the people in Yemen that don't want to authorize us to do military strikes there. I mean, I guess Saudis are just going to go to war with them now, and nobody's going to care. But we're using drones to kill people there because really we can't get boots on the ground. The Yemeni people don't want them there. The Yemeni government doesn't want our people there. So what do? We just drone strike them, and we do it anyway.
Right.
And it's always this mentality that the fight is going to get it done. Whether it's Trump, whether it's Ferguson, the system is fundamentally broken. But I mean, now we're just seeing it in the death throes. There's a hilarious video of a dryer on the internet. And they I don't know what they put in it. It must have been like a 10-pound weight or something, because it literally shakes itself apart. And it actually a testament to how well built that washer is, because literally until the entire case of that washer came apart, it was still going. And it only stopped when the belt came off of the drum and wasn't spinning anymore, and then it started spinning super fast, far faster than it was able to ever supposed to spin, and that's when the engine broke. But literally shakes itself apart, because the only way it fixes that problem to a dryer is to keep spinning.
Yeah.
And I think Trump is just going to be more spin on the same things we've been doing over and over and over again, even though he has that ultra attractive I speak to power thing.
Yeah, nobody wants to confront the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is the 10-pound weight in the dryer that's wrecking everything.
Right. And we could point to multiple things doing that, but
okay, we went deep on that metaphor.
Yeah. I guess the overall takeaway is, look at the way the news is presented to you. If you're not thinking, you're really just kind of going to be drawn to that message. And the message is designed for you to be drawn to it. Instead of reporting news, they're really just trying to suck you in. And I think Trump is just another eyesore in that whole paradigm.
So now we get to switch gears a little bit and come to the yummy side, MSNBC.com.
Oh, Jesus. I thought we were sticking to CNN. I'm going to need more meds CNN if we're going to do MSNBC.
CNN they were just boring. Although they did have a thing about some yummy fried foods that Iowa State Fair, the head of Meet the Press was doing. And that would actually recommend people go watch that. That was entertaining. So yeah, the big headline on MSNBC right now is, this is Huckabee's reasoning for denying 10-year-old rape victim an abortion. So all kinds of jimmies are about to get rustled. Because let me just say, having read through the article, let me just say, I was kind of surprised that I kind of agreed with him on certain principles, and and just not in his conclusion. So this is a great example, and this is something we talked about in previous podcasts. You should check it out on the Seats of Liberty Network and our YouTube and podcast page about the difference between, a sound argument and valid reasoning, right? So he makes some very good statements. Basically, there was a 10-year-old girl in Paraguay that was raped by her stepfather and got pregnant, which, horrible, right? And he's totally with that whole, that's horrible. But he is firmly against the girl getting an abortion. Right? And she's already had birth, so this is kind of ex post facto anyway. So it's just a bunch of political bullshit. So he's consistent in that his argument is two wrongs don't make a right. And he stated explicitly, quote, "I just come down on the side that life is precious. Every life has worth and value." So total consistency and sound reasoning, or, a validly reasoned argument, right? And he concludes by saying, quote, "I don't know where else to go with it except to be consistent and say if life matters, and if that's a person, then every life matters." So, wow, good consistency, right? I mean, I think everyone can kind of applaud the consistency there, even if you disagree with him, right? Mm-hmm. So, he does go on to say, to his credit, that while the raping is horrible, how would the problem be solved by the taking of a life of an innocent child? And he just states plainly, there are no easy answers here, which is, giving a nod to the fact that this is kind of a complex issue, right? Like, it's just not easy black and white crap. You got to get into ethics. For him, unfortunately, that, comes down to religious thinking. But he has a very well-reasoned argument. It's consistent. And, he expresses a value that is universalizable. So it's logical. The failure, of course, only comes down in the nuance. His end argument isn't necessarily sound because it was, the whole life thing. Yeah, I get that. I'm totally on board with the whole every life is precious. Here's the problem. That isn't a consensual relationship there. That kid was raped. And now here's where he gets more cred is the girl's life was not determined to be in danger by the doctors, and she gave birth to the kid. So, pretty good there. It's still obtaining the life is the highest value principle. Okay.
Yeah, I'm following, but...
Yeah. But where the real illustrative part of this entire article comes in is in the comment responses.
Oh, Jesus.
And this is where, this is where it goes. What is the difference between personhood and life, right? And which is the highest value there, et cetera, et cetera. It's a pretty complex argument. And there are no easy answers there. So, but the responses, this just shows you why this is actually on the top of their page.
When you brought up MSNBC, I knew you were dumpster diving. But the comments, section,
sir.
The comment section on MSNBC has got to be the trash bin of the internet.
So Ted050247 says, "I could just vomit listening to that insane reasoning." Now we'll just stop there because the reasoning is sound.
Yeah.
Whether or not you like his conclusions or they're valid, that's different. The reasoning is sound.
Yep.
And then everything else follows that is worse.
Yep.
So he is a disgusting excuse for a human being.
There's the ad hominem.
Perhaps some 6'5", I'm assuming tall, fella should rape him. Even though he can't get pregnant, he could still feel the full effect of rape.
Well, I don't think rape was the
argument in question. It was the pregnancy, right?
Right. And he just advocated somebody be raped. I'm just saying. So what
Yep.
happened to the two wrongs don't make a right? He's like, no, you disagree with my value. Therefore, you should be raped.
Therefore, you should be raped. Yes.
Oh my God. Uh, so, yeah. And then, there's the general ad hominems, which are just, you know, more prolific than rabbits in springtime. Let's just say that. Uh, yeah, but here's there's just so much goodness. But Ted there really encapsulates all that is just horrifically wrong with the left, and he's the top comment, I might add.
Oh, Jesus.
So yeah, what do you think? What do you think about that, Donnie?
I don't even know where to start. I literally don't even know where to start.
Well,
so
we know that all the candidates have been walking that fine line.
Yep.
Abortion, because it's a single issue voter hot button, right?
Yep.
It's like one of the third rails. Unless you're a neocon going for the religious right, it's hot and button. You can't touch it, or you're all done, right?
Yep. And I think it's really difficult. This might sound a little bit crazy, but when somebody who's been raped wants to have an abortion, I really have a hard time. I'll jump on the bandwagon that it's murder, but I won't jump on the bandwagon that it's the woman's fault at all.
Oh, well,
she
no.
is not the murderer. I would happily charge the rapist also with the murder, even though he didn't get to determine whether or not she was going to keep the baby or not. But it's one of those. It's the fringe, right? There's so many. The vast majority of abortion arguments have nothing to do with rape. It's a consensual act. People want to believe that biology and philosophy are equals, and okay, they're different fields of study. But making a biological argument making a philosophical argument about a biological imperative is. I'm at a loss for words. It's beyond ridiculous. Because if I was to tell you that pooping was immoral, then I've just destroyed the concept of morality, really.
Right.
Once morality becomes unavoidable, then we're all immoral, and that's the end of the game. So, when this kind of just really... And of course, this has to be the issue, right? When the left wants to speak about abortion, this is where these cases come from. Instead of looking at the normal, okay, did you consent to have sex? Yes. Well, but I didn't consent to a pregnancy. It's like saying I consented to the pizza, but I don't consent to the calories.
Right.
Nobody is imposing a pregnancy on you. You did it to yourself. And all of the issues when they talk about choice, there's hundreds of choices one makes. Well, I don't know about hundreds, probably a little much, but there's probably a good dozen choices that you make before you end up pregnant. So then to immediately declare that the 12 choices that you made that get you in the position that you became pregnant are completely your business, and then to say, hey, I know I made that last choice I made is now an option. Now this is the choice we're going to focus on, and the huge conflict of interest of how much time and money and just overall difficulty in raising a child. I understand why somebody would want an abortion, but I don't think that humanity can really move forward until all of humans recognize that murder is illegitimate.
Right. So you got this selective. It's selectively choosing to be responsible.
Right.
It's like, oh no, I'll be responsible for, my choices 1 through 11, but not 12. One of the big problems here is, and this gets back to the root of the real problem here, is in Paraguay. it's not legal to get an abortion. So Amnesty International got involved, and they're like, and here's the thing. The Paraguayan authorities, this is a quote, cannot sit idly by while this young rape survivor is forced to endure more agony and torment. So, pause. It's not like stepdad is continuing to rape her.
Mm-hmm.
It's she's pregnant. Mm-hmm. Pregnancy equals agony and torment. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying. Amnesty International, you're doing a great job of the sophistry there.
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, the big problem there is, of course, you have the state involved in something. You know, I mean, this is all after the fact of, you know, a horrible tragedy that, oh, God. I mean, do what you want to with stepdad, you know, according to your customs, because that's vile and horrific. But, yeah, there you go. I mean, you have the government involved in this, and that becomes a problem. And Huckabee's just basically saying, I agree with the value, you know, which is, okay, commendable. You're in favor of life. Roger that. We're on board. Here's the big part where he loses all of his credibility as a moral agent and a proponent of anything that even resembles a rational morality. Quote from the article, Huckabee previously said he is even open to the idea of using federal troops and the FBI to stop women from having abortions. If you try to have an abortion, I will have other people shoot you because life is the highest value to me. So, yeah.
How many people on the planet are killed every day? Amnesty International gets involved in this very horrific case where one person is hinging in the balance, and then of course we're going to take the authoritarian lunatic and add everybody piling on into a gunfight over it.
Right.
And
so yeah,
I still have trouble wrapping my mind around. I figured out what my blank was, and I just can't wrap my mind around how someone can just pull out the term personhood as if how that is somehow separate from being a human and make an argument that leads to the end of another human over it. Right. And I really, I mean, we've been through this in another episode, and I don't want to be a dead horse, but man.
Yeah.
Man.
Ridiculous. So, what's the next delicious fried food of sophistry you have on your plate from Fox?
Well, this is more political theater. So, Trey Gowdy is Representative Trey Gowdy is going after Hillary Clinton, and he's been doing this for a long time. And we were talking before. I don't know what the Clintons did. I really don't. But when Bill came to town, things were kind of in the Clinton camp. But they had been sliding away from the Clintons slowly for a long time. And I think Hillary's going to end up over these secret emails and not handling classified material. You know, my TS is still good, and I can tell you it's a big deal. Investigations, fines, loss of rank, discharges, all kinds of things happen over not handling classified material correctly.
This is true, but I would like to point out something.
Shoot.
You were under a military contract.
Sure.
She had a political position.
Sure, but the same rules apply. Now, I understand that for political people, they don't end up getting prosecuted for it.
Therefore, the rules don't actually apply. Now, they may apply on paper.
Yes.
But on paper, 90% of what the government's doing right now is totally illegitimate towards the Constitution.
Yeah.
Which, stand by for next episode, folks, because we're going to take on the Constitution.
Yeah, that's going to be good times.
Plug, shameless. So, yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of achieving political power, is to be exempt from the rules that everyone else has to follow.
Okay.
I mean, hey, how else are you going to benefit from exploitation?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on.
Yep.
So of
and just
course Clinton can lie to Congress and not get actually, have to pay the price. Of
yep.
course.
And I'm going to make a quote just to kind of show you how ridiculous it is. This is Trey Gowdy talking. If she's going to insist that she's only coming once, comma, let's just start there. So at what point do humans, because I know how the government operates and they assume control over all humans, insist that they're only coming once? At what point do you tell somebody who issues you a federal subpoena to go pound sand? You want to talk about living a life of privilege. You know, talk about being above the fray. Oh, well, we've got her booked to go in on October 22nd. And then he finishes with, if she's going to insist she's only coming once, I'm going to insist that once be fully constructed, which means she's going to be there for a while.
I would just like to, just because I have to, phrasing. I mean, she's kind of.
Well,
I'm just thinking about Hillary.
I think that's it.
God.
I think that's particularly hilarious because the look on her face says, "Once has been a long time."
Correct. But I'm sorry, I totally derailed that because my mind's in the gutter.
Yeah. Bill's been running around longer than I've been alive. So here we are, this political class of people really just demonstrate on a day-to-day basis that they are literally above it all. The rules don't apply to them, and as part of the constitutionalist argument, when you take a special preferred group of people and you give them this power, expecting people to behave differently, I mean, I don't expect anything less than this from Hillary.
Or anyone else.
Or anybody else. I don't expect it. But the people who keep going into the voting booth and believing that this is the way it works, as opposed to thinking and rationally coming to a conclusion that this is kind of hilarious, they're believing this is what's going to happen when the foundational premise of your system is moral hazard. This is what it looks like. They will come and go as they please. They will fleece the people and every donor and the system as a whole. They're going to fleece the whole thing for their own benefit. And I mean, it makes perfect sense, but at the same time, it's really unconscionable.
Yeah, this is kind of where I come. This is why I really come down on consequentialists and utilitarianism. And, you get this argument of, well, whatever's best for the most people. Well, as soon as you do that, you're really just creating a system by which, the most sophisticated, and look up the root of that word, speakers are able to put forward the argument that X, Y, and Z are going to be the best things for the most people, and then do the opposite. And, benefit exclusively themselves and their cronies. And I mean, good God, you don't even have to have a good understanding of history to recognize this is Rome. That's patronage. I mean, that's the system that kept their empire up. And shockingly, I mean, sarcastically shockingly, this is the same basic kind of system that you had in the British Empire and every empire. Because this is the result of that moral hazard. You always get patronage type systems whereby, you lie to the general public, with a good orator, and you exploit their stupidity and their willingness to accept your bullshit.
Yep. Mark Twain said it best. It's harder to convince somebody they've been fooled than to fool them. And really, there's a lot more than just pulling a fast one. We're all kind of brought up in this system and it's ingrained in us, but there it is. It just slaps you in the face. Now that information gets out much quicker because of the internet as opposed to, preferred and chosen news sources, this is really becoming blatantly obvious to where I would say for a very long time, like, ignorance really was a valid excuse. There's a lot of people who didn't know the earth was flat and really had no way to figure it out. And, Do you approve of them burning people at the stake for saying the world is a sphere? Well, no, you don't approve of that, but you don't really blame the flat earthers for not understanding through their own ignorance. But now ignorance is really becoming a choice, because if you can't tell what's going on when it is so blatant and open, then I mean, at what point can you just look at somebody and say, "Look, I'm sorry, but you're just too stupid to vote"? We cannot allow an intellect like this into this system, which I would argue against the system anyway. Voting is horribly inefficient and problematic. You know, it's a win-lose thing instead of a win-win situation, which is just as easy to create, if not easier, than voting. But I just it shouldn't strike anybody why at this point things are the way they are, and why even, you know, people kind of look at us weird for questioning the Constitution. You know, the Constitution has either failed to prevent this or made it happen, and I'll say it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. So, back to our lovely liberal friends at MSNBC, and I use liberal with the giant air quotes because they are not liberals.
Yeah, lunatic.
Yeah. So, and this just comes back to our winning personality of the day, probably of the year. That would be Trump. So Trump rolls out his immigration plan. In big quotes, Mexico must pay. Right? So, I love the tough talk. Americans dig on that. Yeah, okay, you already got me a soft on. How are you going to get me hard, Trump? How are you going to get me hard? Mm-hmm. Just, don't leave me limp here. So, his message is composed of three central parts. Build a border wall, enforce laws, and ensure improved jobs, wages, and security. So the way he wants to go about this is listing a handful of repercussions, including increasing fees on all temporary visas issued to Mexican CEOs and diplomats, and potentially canceling them, as well as increasing fees at ports of entry, etc. So he wants to triple the number of ICE officers. Yay, government jobs. Instate nationwide E-Verify, because that's such an effective system. Hey, how about I just pay you under the table? Boom, thanks. Issue mandatory return of all criminal aliens, which I think we can all understand the reasoning behind that.
Yeah.
And detain undocumented immigrants until they are sent home, among others. So more prison, yay. So those are his political things. Now, here is where he actually makes some rational sense in regards to his economic argument. So he states that the influx of foreign workers holds down salaries, more precisely wages, right? Keeps unemployment high. Yeah, okay. And makes it difficult for kind of a symptom of the first two, right? So, yeah. So that's all okay, legit. The hilarious part here, though, is, these are his ideas. Now, the whole wall idea, I think Penn and Teller really kind of demonstrated how ridiculous that was. They did a short video. They had some Mexican contractors, illegals, come and explicitly illegals come and build a wall to the same standards and specifications that the government had with their immigration wall down there, right? And then get around it. And it was like 5 minutes. Under, over, through it, whatever. They were done. Out, through it. So, yeah. But and it comes to immigrants. And, there's a number of different reasons why Americans tend to have a problem with immigrants. It's not really that they're xenophobes, because you can just look around, and we're a very diverse culture here. This society is, I mean, it's still primarily Western European in origin, you know, culturally speaking, but boy, we got a lot distributed equally in by any regard. But the principal problem, number one, is economic right now. Because you can just look back at when immigration becomes a hot button issue, it always ties in when there's a recession. Americans don't give a damn about immigrants when shit's going well.
Yep.
We didn't hear boo about it in the 90s. Nobody was talking about the illegal immigrants that were streaming across the California borders and the Texan borders in the 90s, you know, except for some kind of obscure people who weren't even in economics for a large portion of the people. And Trump makes a sound argument there. That is the effect of more people with lower skills on an economy. That's, like it or not, people, that's just reality. That's economics. It depresses wages. And, you know, I mean, when you have the Fed and everything screwing that up anyway, that's a negative. That's just a net loss. Okay? And the fact that they send a bunch of that money back home to Mexico, so it doesn't interact with the U.S. economy, that's a siphon. That's a siphon.
Yep.
This is one reason why the Mexican middle class has actually been growing, despite the fact that it's like a borderline failed narco state that's just like one of the most corrupt in the world. It's like in the top 10 list. And when you can beat Africa for corruption, man, you are batting 1,000, man, because those guys mastered that shit. So there's the economic argument, and then there's the, you know, and my voluntarist and my anarchists, my libertarian brothers and sisters, in a stateless society, it doesn't matter. This word isn't even immigration. It's called moving.
Yep.
And there's absolutely no there's no moral aspect to moving. There's nothing wrong with it. There's not even a cost benefit except for the individual, or potentially in an aggregate on some demographic level, which you couldn't even argue morally for, you know, oh, that's bad or anything. No. It's just moving. But we don't live in a stateless society. We live in a welfare state.
Yep.
And it's just a fact that you can look up that these people suck on the teat of the state. And what's worse, they're just as likely as our domestic population of the permanent underclass to vote for more of the same.
Yep.
Now you can approach that argument from one of two ways. One, let's try to hold these things off, you know, the kind of conservative approach. Let's try to hold these things off and maintain as much as we can, try to make people better people in the interim, make the arguments for liberty, keep them at bay. The longer we can do that, so that we can potentially achieve this stateless society before everything goes to shit, right? Or you can take the other argument, which is bring them all in. Yes, let's all go vote for the welfare state. Let's do all these things, make it crash faster, right? The problem is, at least, and this is completely conjecture, so it's just my opinion and everything, I don't think we're ready for that. I mean...
is anybody ever ready for that?
I mean, what? How many... I mean, even just at an ethical point, intellectually, what, maybe 5% of Americans, even remotely, economically sound in their thinking, rational in their approach to things?
Yeah,
peaceful primarily in their interactions with others?
What are the odds, though? I mean, how does one prepare a state, the people that make up a state, for the crash of a state?
Yeah. And that's a valid.
I mean, if they're prepared for it, it's really more a drawdown, an inevitable drawdown, and an understanding. A crash kind of implies that nobody's ready for it.
Right. And I think that's where, it really, the indecisiveness, the uncertainty, that's the word I'm looking for. The uncertainty really is. I I would say very confidently that a crash is far more likely than a drawdown, just based off of empiricism.
Yep.
I mean, we have seen drawdowns in the size of government in America. We've seen massive ones. The end of World War II, we went from like one of the most overrated. I mean, good Lord, Soviet Union was about the only thing more heavily regulated and centrally controlled than we were. And at the end of World War II, that shit came to a screeching halt, and our economy boomed for the next 30 years. Now, that is correlation, not causation, because there was a lot of factors. But, it's a strong correlation.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the government had like 95% control of the entire economy, and you take that down to like 10 or 15%, like virtually overnight, within a year. Man, of course there's a boom. Of course there's a boom. All the resources get allocated rationally. It's amazing what happens. Right. But yeah, so this immigration issue, it kind of hinges on these two things. And prior to, what was it, Ted Kennedy, I guess, introducing the Immigration Act back in '67, which kind of changed where we got our immigrants from. We really didn't have a permanent underclass other than our black population, who were kind of lifting themselves out of that status.
Yep.
We didn't really have that problem. And we didn't have aside from the Chinese, we really didn't have these pockets of cultural, right? I mean, just look at Rome. One of the closest parallels to the United States. You can't do that and survive, or you will end up having, the proverbial Visigoths sacking the capital. That's what happens, especially when you treat them badly, which we're doing. Hello, all the black, all the violence on blacks by cops and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, good Lord, this is just a kind of a modern retelling of the old story. But
I think the cops are killing just as many blacks as they are whites, but black definitely gets a little more news.
I don't know what the stats are, but I can definitely agree with the idea that the media hypes the black aspect more. It's more salacious,
right.
So of course they're going to. Right. They're driven by ratings. Of course they're going to.
Yep.
Oh, it's a divisive hot button thing that's going to get a lot of feels. Make that a headliner. Mm-hmm. Yes. So. Oh. So yeah.
I don't. I think another aspect of the immigration thing. You could. I think there's a sound argument or a valid argument that says that to a certain extent, by having an open welfare state and an open border, you're essentially recruiting voters to vote for anybody who's giving out the free lunch.
Oh yeah, totally.
But I think there's also another portion of it to even catch the ones that don't do that, and maybe the ones that aren't sending money back to Mexico, and that is that our economy kind of runs on this debt-based theme, and I think some of these people are being brought in just so that they could be part of that. How many? Once everybody's got the credit card maxed out, you really essentially need more people to start coming in and running up the credit card bill. Start borrow money for a house, borrow money for an education, borrow money for, whatever you're going to borrow it for, and even if it's just credit cards. And I think that's just another economic aspect of it that I mean, there's more than one reason. As with most human actions, there's motives that you can't tell and things like that. But I've heard some pretty interesting arguments that just bringing more people in to borrow is part of the political goal, because that's keeping certain banks in business and giving them reason to exist, and then giving them reason to say they're too big to fail. Just keeping that same spin of American politics rolling, instead of it getting to that dead end. They're trying to keep it so that I mean, every politician in Washington would love to reuse the same answers every 5 years. They would love to keep that, instead of having to find new reasons and new ways to convince you that something else new needs to happen. never mind the program that we passed that caused all these problems. This is the new program to fix all the problems we caused with the first program. And,
Right.
Yeah, I'm. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
You know, the most awesome kind of Manchurian liberal candidate would be something along the lines of, kids. You know, I mean, liberals basically get their power by buying votes. You know, they promise free shit, right? A real cynical Manchurian type candidate for the liberals would be somebody along the lines of the opponent of Gaius Gracchus in ancient Rome. So Gaius Gracchus was basically like an old ancient Roman liberal, right? He was like a populist. He was like, yeah, I'll give you all this free shit. And it was freaking everybody out, who all the aristocrats who were in power and everything. And they just bought off another tribune, and they're like, hey, dude, go in there and beat him somehow. And the only way that they were able to beat Gaius Gracchus was the guy who they bought off basically went in there and said, oh, you know, he wants to give you this much, I'll give you twice that much. I mean, just completely unsustainable shit, right? Just totally you know, you want 4 colonies overseas? I say 23 colonies. You know, I mean, just ridiculously unsustainable crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
He won. He won like crazy. And it worked. And then as soon as he was at power, they kind of rolled back all the previous reforms, and they didn't give him shit. And it's fantastic. Now, you know, but it just illustrates the fact that all this shit. I mean, I doubt seriously that any of these people realize at a conscious level that they're replicating the past. But my God, and stunning late empire bullshit that we can see throughout you know, our current system. So yeah, you got anything else to say regarding Trump and immigrants?
No, no. Other than, I mean, I think he's just another. He's a more interesting placeholder for a standard politician.
Yeah, and I'll give him this props too. He was right, and he said we wouldn't even be talking about this if I hadn't brought it up.
Yep.
Yeah, damn right. Because everyone else is a mealy-mouthed coward.
Yep, he really is right about that. He does have some attractive qualities. I would definitely drink a beer with the guy. I mean,
yeah. No, totally. Hey, dude, you know, hire me. Hire me. I will find ways to make myself valuable. But yeah, absolutely. Interesting dude. Although I think he always strikes me a little bit crazy, like my dad or something. You know, the no filter, and you know, which is good. You know, that's kind of a virtue in a way. But yeah.
I know about the no filter life. It's awesome.
Right. This is why I surround myself only with people I voluntarily choose to associate, because they know what they're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Well, this is a good discussion.
Yes, yeah. I wish the news was a little more interesting this week, but it kind of wasn't. You get what you get.
Yeah.
Next week, we're going to do something a little more prepared and a little more in depth. We've kind of the previous episodes have really been about just trying to get an understanding of how to get a hold of your own arguments and the things that get in the way. Next week, we are going to make an argument. We're actually looking for some counterpoints. I might have one or two. I'm not sure if they're going to show up. I mean, they're, you know, we got to discuss it, but we're going to have constitutionalists versus anarchists. Might be one, might be two. Nothing, you know, no Jerry Springer bullshit. Just
no.
We're looking at, you know,
friendly debate.
Presenting both sides of the argument, and you know, you guys choose which makes more sense.
And if you're interested in being that constitutionalist, making that argument, that minarchist who wants the night watchman state, you want to make the argument for that? Let us know via Facebook, or however else you can get hold of us and let us know.
Yep. Yeah, we're open to that, or other things. Truth be told, Lloyd and I have talked. At no point do we really want to sound like an echo chamber, so we would really like to hear the counterpoint. And not to say we haven't heard them before, we understand, but if you think you've got a really good argument for why why the idea of the Constitution should be followed. Why is it so good? Then yeah, we'd love to hear it for you. And any other arguments you got or points,
Yeah,
you know
and
where to
if
find us.
yeah, and if one of you doesn't step up to the plate, or someone we find, we can make these arguments ourselves. I
Yeah,
was a card-carrying member of the LP, so yeah, I know I'm pretty conversant. And but wouldn't you like to hear a new voice?
indeed.
Alrighty.
Okay. So thanks for listening this week. I know it was a little slow. Next week's gonna pick up, so come get you some Constitution.
Have a good night.
Good night.